Hello, happy Thursday. Welcome back to another episode of this podcast. For today, we're going to talk about the Jack Adams Award finalists and why it was kind of a joke that Mike Sullivan was not one of those finalists, and just why I don't really like the award that much. We're going to get into the penalty kill today, review that from this season, what I would like to see more of for next year, and just talk about what went wrong in the playoffs. And we're also going to debunk some weird Kris Letang rumors that I saw on social media today. And if I have time, we'll get into why Rickard Rakell, if it comes down to between him and Bryan Rust, why it's the easy call, I think, to bring him back, especially with the numbers that he put up for this team. So that's all coming up right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter, Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. Just watch the second period of that Panthers Bolt series, and compared to the Battle of Alberta, this is probably like a 1.2. There's just like no intensity in it. I thought this was going to be a pretty spirited series, but both these teams don't really look like they're not even rivals, to say the least. But Panthers were able to tie it late in the second period. As of this recording, I'm sure by the time everyone listens to this, the winner of the game will be decided. So to kick things off, let's get into the Jack Adams Award finalists. So today it was announced, Mike Sullivan was not one of the finalists. Gerard Gallant was on there. And, the biggest thing of this award for me is, it's this. Well, I'll say the finalists. Andrew Bennett, that makes sense. I think he did a great job. Daryl Sutter, I think that's mainly fine too. But, I will say this about the Jack Adams Award. Show me a good goaltender, and I'll show you a good coach. Gerard Gallant has no business being on that ballot. I think most people thought the Rangers were going to, contend for a playoff spot this year, if not get into the playoffs, just because of the talent that they already had. I mean, everyone knows how good Adam Fox was. Everyone knows how good Artemi Panarin is, Mika Zibanejad. Chris Kreider's had a career year. I mean, sure, no one expected him to be that good, but, there's still plenty of talent. I mean, Shesterkin was already pretty good in his tenure going into this year, but, Gallant literally rode his coattails. He was .940 for the entire year. System-wise, the Rangers really didn't do anything that blew the doors off teams. I mean, sure, what they're doing has worked for them. Their power play is one of the best in the league. Shesterkin's one of the best goaltenders in the league. I know they stink at 5v5, but, I don't think just because you have a rock-solid power play and you have a goaltender that wants to play God, you should be as a Jack Adams finalist. I'll give two coaches, I'll give a coach outside of Mike Sullivan who I think should have been a finalist, and that's Todd Mclellan with the Los Angeles Kings. I mean, this team, some people were high on them, some weren't, but they made the playoffs with, I shouldn't say relative ease, but a little more easy than I thought some people thought they were going to. And they pushed the Oilers to the brink. I mean, especially without Victor Arvidsson, Andrew Doughty for that entire series. The Kings took a lot of strides this year, and that's a team that's going to be set up for, I think, a lot of future success. The Kings, they don't really have a lot of, even on their team right now, they don't have a lot of star talent. I mean, they have good players, but there's no bona fide elite player on that team. And McLellan was still able to guide them to the playoffs and come within one game of winning a series against a team that, they looked down and out in the Edmonton Oilers. So, in terms of, that award, I think someone like that should have been nominated. Jay Woodcroft of the Edmonton Oilers. He took over for Dave Tippett, who was the head coach halfway through the year. The Oilers were not even in a playoff spot. And yes, you should be expected to make the playoffs with the Oilers because you have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. But, the team was not playing well outside of those two players when Dave Tippett was coaching them. And, he was, and Woodcroft was able to come in and, change things up systematically and get some of the players like, Zach Hyman and Puljujarvi and Nugent Hopkins and some of the other defensemen to really start playing better hockey. And the Oilers not only made the playoffs, they made it with relative ease. down the stretch, and now they're in the second round. They're down 1-0 to the Calgary Flames. But for a while, they did not look like they were going to get in, just because they were outside the playoff picture. But they were able to rile off a lot of big wins down the stretch. And I think Woodcroft did a great job. So, and I'm sure he's probably going to get the full-time gig going into next year. And then Mike Sullivan. Obviously, this is a Penguins-centric podcast. I thought he did a terrific job this year. Evan Rodriguez and Jeff Carter were their top two centers for a good chunk of the first half of the season. Evgeny Malkin had to miss the first half of the year. Sidney Crosby had to miss a bit of time with the wrist injury. Also had to miss some time with COVID. Sid was not really playing at all for that first month of the season. And, Mike Sullivan was able to keep the team afloat and in contention, even though if they were getting some loser points, they were still getting points and staying in the playoff race. And then when they started to get some guys back from COVID, then they were able to run rampant throughout the league. So, I like coaching jobs like that over someone who literally just, rode the coattails of one of the best goaltending seasons of all time and a power play that, that's just really freaking good. I don't really understand why Gallant is on there. I mean, I think it's the Broadcasting Association that votes on that award. I thought it was the PHWA at first. I believe I was wrong. I think it's the National Broadcasting Association that does it. Again, just a really odd choice. Daryl Sutter, I'm more fine with that just because the Flames, they were fine last year, but they needed to show something this year, and he was able to coach them to one of the best records in the Western Conference, really turn them around. I mean, Johnny Gaudreau had his best season of his career under Sutter. Chris Tanev continued to play well. Jacob Markstrom had a great year. Sutter has always been a great coach, so I get that one. Andrew Bennett, I understand, but also at the same time, this Panthers roster is absolutely loaded. Joel Quenneville was, before he had to step down as the Panthers head coach, and rightfully so. I'm glad he did with the whole Kyle Beach situation. The Panthers were already gunning for that top spot in the Eastern Conference. So, I think in a perfect world, you replace him too with someone like Mclellan, Jay Woodcroft, Mike Sullivan, maybe someone else out there who, potentially did a better job. Maybe even, Bonus from Dallas. The Stars were not really a sexy pick to make the playoffs this year. And they gave the Flames one heck of a fight. In the first round. Jake Ottinger was just absolutely ridiculous, to say the least. So, I don't tend to get too amped about the NHL awards just because I know they're for the regular season. But, sooner rather than later, I would love for Mike Sullivan to actually get nominated for this award because he is a top 3 coach in hockey. Again, I understand. Show me a good goaltender and I'll show you a head coach. That usually happens with every head coach that wins that award. But I just wish that, more of the people that vote on this award, especially the broadcasters, they can, look at the body of work that, coaches have had to face, like, COVID outbreaks and injuries and, an aging roster coming into this year, a roster that, people didn't really expect to make the playoffs and they ended up making it, just, stuff like that over, oh, hey, this guy had a really good goaltender, or, hey, this guy took over a team that was already going to make the playoffs, or, at least those are the two that I'm not really, thrilled with. There's a fly on my screen. Again, Daryl Sutter, totally fine with. But, I think at this point, in order for Mike Sullivan to, win the award, be nominated for the award, both Letang and Malkin have to literally, be gone. And then they make the playoffs with Sidney Crosby and Jake Gensel and no one else. And then the Broadcasting Association's like, oh, yeah, we'll nominate Mike Sullivan now. It's like, no, why don't you do that the last couple of years where he literally has guided the team to a top 3 finish in the Metro? Well, at least a top 3 finish in the Metro this year. Last year, they freaking won, the East Division when they had the most man games lost due to injury. It didn't matter. Mike Sullivan knows what he is doing, and it's still a farce that he has not been nominated for this award. In the 7 seasons that he has been with the Penguins, I will never understand that. So that wraps up this first segment of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Wanted to get into that. Coming up in the next segment, we're going to get into some of the penalty kill talk, what I want to see next year, potentially deployment-wise. And we'll also get to that weird Kris Letang rumor that I saw on 93.7 The Fan, and I'm going to debunk that a little quick. But before we get to that, I love brownies, but you know what I love more? Brownie batter. Sometimes I eat half the batter just while I'm making the brownies. Imagine if you could lick that brownie spatula clean and get some protein in. You are in luck because Built has a new creation, and this one is better than ever. The Bounty Batter Puff. You heard me right. This puff takes protein bars to a whole new level, and they're available right now at Built.com. Have you tried the Built Puffs yet? I'm not sure what you're waiting for if you haven't. Puffs are a chocolate-covered marshmallow protein bar. That is right. Deliciously flavored marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. With 140 calories, 17 grams of protein, and only 7 grams of sugar, Brownie Batter Puffs are the perfect pick-me-up for any day. All Built Puffs are covered with 100% real chocolate. That means with Built, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy eating it. They'll have you completely forgetting that you are eating a protein bar. No need to pinch yourself. This is real life. You go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. So let's get to that weird Kris Letang rumor that I saw today. This came courtesy of 93.7 The Fan. If I can find this tweet here real quick on my timeline. So Chris Mueller put this out. Beautiful ratio, by the way. 17 quote tweets, only 10 likes. And he had Gord Stellick on his show, former Leafs general manager, New York assistant, former New York assistant general manager as well. I think he comes from Sportsnet. And the tweet says, he suggests that term, not salary, might be the biggest issue. He says Letang could be looking for a 7-year deal. And then Chris says, would you want the Penguins to give Kris Letang a 7-year contract? Where are these rumors coming from? And in all seriousness, this is straight up propaganda. Kris Letang even said at his press conference, yeah, I'd like to play for 4 to 5 more years. Josh Yohe of The Athletic, he's been saying, yeah, it's probably going to be a 4 to 5 year deal if he comes back. Elliot Friedman said the Penguins offered him a 4-year deal. Money was a little below his current AAV. He is not going to sign a 7-year contract to go into his age 42 and 43 year. That is absolutely ludicrous. The guy is not 30 or 31 years old here. He is 35 and he's going to be 36. Like, what planet are we on? And I understand that Mueller is probably trying to rile up the masses a little bit just because, he's on the afternoon drive or whatever that show is with him and I think it's Pony, Andrew Filipponi for 93.7 The Fan. But, all I can say is this: get better guests. I mean, at the end of the day, that's ridiculous. I mean, Kris Letang is not going to be signing a 7-year deal with any team in free agency if he gets to that point. I mean, he probably will. But I mean, that's not happening. When he signs, it's going to be probably a 4 to 5 year term. I had to spend at least a couple of minutes talking about that for today's episode. Again, if the Penguins do bring him back, it's going to be for 4 to 5 years. It'll take him to his age 39 to 40 season. And then, if he wants to, he can retire. But, he was ratioed here, rightfully so. That's absolutely ridiculous that, I had a yawn come. Oh, sorry about that. The first time I think I've yawned on this podcast in a long time. There's no chance that's going to happen. Anyways, moving on to the penalty kill. Again, another key area where the Penguins they got bullied in that series against the New York Rangers. And, I want to see a better deployment next year. I think at times this year, the Penguins, Mike Vellucci, who runs the penalty kill as one of the assistant head coaches. Speaking of him, I think he might be getting some head coaching interviews at some point. At least that's what Elliot Friedman said. Some of the players that they were putting out there, I didn't really understand. Say for example, Brian Boyle. Sure, he has a long reach, and I personally don't think he's going to be on the team next year. Nice story. I love the guy to death, but I don't think you can bring him back. And maybe for a 13th forward, but I don't really want him playing on an every night basis next year like he was for a lot of this year. I just think that his legs were totally shot by the end of the year. But and you could definitely see that on the penalty kill. He was not getting his stick into the shooting lanes. He wasn't doing as good of a job blocking shots. Brock McGinn was not really playing that well on the penalty kill either, especially when he came back from his injury down the stretch. I'm fine with Teddy Bluger on there because he's usually one of the best penalty killers, but in the playoffs, he's been really bad the last couple of years. Something has not been right with him. I saw this flown around a little bit, I think, on social media during the series. Why didn't they play Kasperi Kapanen a good bit on that PK? For starters, he did it a lot when he was in Toronto, and it makes sense. The guy is super fast. He was good defensively this year. The metrics were really good for him. in his own zone. I'm sure he has no problem throwing his body around, and he's a threat shorthanded. Not only is he a fast skater, he has one heck of a shot when he's using it right. I know he struggled a lot this year, obviously, but to get more confidence going, why didn't the Penguins do that? Just because, again, Kapanen did it a lot under both Mike Babcock and Sheldon Keefe in Toronto. I felt like it was an opportunity wasted there. I also do want to see Sidney Crosby and maybe Jake Gensel on the PK a bit more. Mike Sullivan has used them at times on the PK, and it's worked. They've actually scored a few shorthanded goals together, and they've gotten chances. I know Sid, he probably doesn't want to lay his body on the line too much, but he's still one of the best defensive centers in the league. I'm sure he would have no problem killing penalties. This is always my biggest thing when it comes to the PK. Anyone can do it. I don't think you necessarily need PK specialists in order to win. If you are good at 5v5, you can kill penalties. I really don't see why you can't. I guess some people think you have to be like a Craig Adams type player to kill penalties or something. And I'm not saying you can put Evgeny Malkin on the PK. I think that would not be a good idea. So he's obviously not as good defensively as some of the other players I'm throwing around. He would maybe get some chances, but again, are you really expecting him to put his body on the line there? Probably not. But I still stand by the fact that, basically anyone can kill a penalty if they're really up for it. I also want to see the PK play a lot more aggressive. In that Rangers series especially, they were giving them all day long. I don't know if Vellucci was coaching them to be passive, but it was not working. I mean, the Rangers power play in that series going into game 6 or 7, I believe it was 6, 5 for 15, 33.3%. That's not good enough. And I believe it was over 25% when it was all said and done. You cannot win a series if your PK is giving up a goal 25% of the time. It's not good enough. They were not pressuring Adam Fox at the point nearly as much. They were giving up way too many easy zone entries. They were having to rely on the goaltending too much. And, it's one thing for Tristan Jarry to bail you out. It's a completely other thing for Louis Domingue to bail you out, because he was not doing that in that series. I mean, just we watched game 7 with the power plays the Rangers got. So many failed, lazy clearing attempts, and Jarry had to make glove save after pad save after all these other saves just to, kill off the penalties. And he was probably their best penalty killer this year, in my opinion. So that's definitely going to have to be something that changes going in next year. Again, I just want it to be more aggressive. I want to change up, the usage for players. Maybe you don't use Brock McGinnis as much. Brian Boyle coming up, I think, is going to be decently. What do you change up the defenseman you want to put down there? If Brian Dumoulin is still on the team, do you take him off? Maybe put someone like Mike Matheson on there, who was great at skating the puck out of his own end. I think I would love to see them do that. I don't think he really got a lot of PK time that much this year. They mainly had, I think, John Marino on there, Brian Dumoulin, Kris Letang, and I'm fine with Letang having PK minutes. I mean, he's also great at moving the puck, out of his own zone. But, I still, would love to see someone like Matheson on there a little bit too. So, again, would love to see some of the more top players kill penalties. For example, Brad Marchand in Boston, he's one of their best penalty killers. Patrice Bergeron, he also has killed penalties throughout his career in Boston. Jonathan Taves, I think he did it in Chicago for a lot of years before he started to get a little washed up in the Windy City. So, I want to see more of that on that unit. I thought it was good during the regular season, but whatever happened going into the playoffs just completely stopped. And I think that's one of the main reasons why this team is not playing in Raleigh going into game 2 tomorrow. So still a little more to get to for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. We're going to get into why it should be Rickard Rakell over Bryan Rust, just by a look of the numbers, at least, for this season. But before I get to that, our partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all of your betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. This fly is just absolutely killing me. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter, Hunter Hodes. follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. So let's get to Rickard Rakell's overall sample size with the Penguins. 19 games after coming over from Anaheim, 277 minutes at 5v5. He was on the ice for 54% of the shot attempts, 61% of the actual goals, 58% of the scoring chances, 60% of the high danger chances, 11 high danger goals for, 5 high danger goals against. His on-ice shooting percentage was about 11%, which was up 2 whole percent from when he was in Anaheim. This was his highest shooting percentage since 2016-17 when he was with Anaheim. And on-ice save percentage for the Penguins goaltenders, a .921. So, he definitely did have some good goaltending, to say the least. He was absolutely electric this season for the Penguins. And again, if you're deciding between him and Bryan Rust, and this comes, a little courtesy off of DK's Daily Shot that I was listening to this morning. He definitely inspired me to spend just a couple minutes bringing this up. For me, I'm going with Rakell. Bryan Rust, again, I think he has priced himself out of this. He's going to go make a lot of money, rightfully so. He deserves it. It's probably going to be a 6x6 deal. Obviously, replacing that production is not going to be easy. A player that scores 20-plus goals for numerous seasons in a row, they don't grow on trees. But they do have a player in Rakell that I think can do that, and he was also electric playing with Jake Guentzel and Sidney Crosby. Their expected goals for it, well over 60%. Of course, he was well over 55%. High danger chances wise, I believe well over 60% as well. He was just such a seamless fit on that line. I wanted to see more of it in the playoffs, but obviously Rakell got hurt off of that dirty hit in game 1. Could not even return until game 7. It was so unfortunate that the Penguins really couldn't see Rakell for a full playoff series just because of that gross hit. I really think he makes a bigger impact in that series if he doesn't get headshot there, because I believe that was a concussion. I know I read it was a head injury, and I assume it was. He was skating a little bit, but it looked like his symptoms weren't going away as fast as some other players have. But it also took about a week or two. It's not uncommon for a player to come back from a concussion. Contract wise, again, if he's definitely on my must re-sign list, I would go a 3 to 4 year term, 3.5 to 4 million per. I think that's fine. I don't think he's going to ask for 5. Maybe a comparable is like the Brandon Saad deal. I think Saad is signed for 4.5. If you can get him for a bit below that, that would be big. In my opinion, he was a great fit on either the Sid or the Malkin line. He was the winger that this team was desperately lacking heading into the playoffs. And, I liked the move at the time. I thought it was going to be good. I didn't think it was going to be that good. Where again, underlying numbers wise, 61% of the actual goals, 60% of the high danger chances, 54% of the shot attempts, 58% of the scoring chances. Compared to where he was in Anaheim, 50% of the scoring chances this year with them. This was the highest numbers. His highest underlying numbers for most for his career since basically 2014. That was the last time he had a scoring chance for a rate higher than 58%. That's the only time. Actually, I kind of think he rediscovered his mojo a little bit. I do remember listening to the Jeff Merrick show. Brian Burke came on, and he talked about how I think Rakell had some sort of like condition that was like affecting his play. I want to say it was something to do with like his diet or something like that. I'll go back and find the clip, but it was something that I don't think had ever been reported about him. And apparently, Burke said they've been able to get it under control, I think, this season. And then when he came to Pittsburgh, he found a bunch of magic beans, and he was looking like the Rickard Rakell that, at least Burke had been watching for several years, because obviously he has a lot of ties to the Ducks. He watches a lot of their games. But it was interesting that, he was talking about doing their homework on that player, that, that was a story that had not gotten out about him. And, you could definitely see the difference that, switching from Anaheim to Pittsburgh going from a system that I don't think provides a lot of offensive ability with Dallas Eakins to a Mike Sullivan system where, it's go, 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 go. So I would love if he's able to come back. He's on my, again, after Letang and Malkin, he is my number 3 guy that they have to resign, at least in my opinion. And again, 3 to 4 year deal if you can. 3.5 to 4 million would be really nice to lock him up for that. I would absolutely love if they could bring him back. And yes, right now, if you're comparing the two between him and Bryan Rust, I'm taking Rickard Rakell just because he's younger, and I don't think he's going to get worse as that deal goes on, unlike Bryan Rust, who I do think I shouldn't say some bad years could be coming for Rust, but I think some not as good years could be coming just because, his age is obviously a big factor and just how hard he plays and all that. So that'll do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I appreciate all of you for listening to this one. I'll be back with another episode on Friday. Monday, Danny Shirey of DK Pittsburgh Sports is going to join us. Can't wait to pick his brain on what to expect for the offseason, talking about that series against the Rangers, so much other stuff that I have planned for that one. I haven't brought Danny on, I think, since the beginning of the season, to be honest. So I'm really excited to have Danny back on for that. So again, another episode coming Friday. Danny comes back to the show on Monday. I hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday, and I'll talk to you on Friday.